Yo, what is up everyone? Randy here. Today we're going to be talking about focal lengths and the differences that each focal length and each type of focal length is going to have on your photos. So let's get into it. Alright guys, so your focal length is going to really control a few things in your photos. It's going to control how much of your scene you're going to get into your picture. It's also going to control the type of depth of field that you're going to get, and it's going to control the background compression and background blur. So when it comes to focal lengths, there's really just 5 different categories of lenses. To start off with, anything under 21 millimeters is considered a ultra wide lens. And then the next step up from that is just your standard wide angle lenses, which is anything from 21 millimeters to 35 millimeters. The next step up from that is from 35 millimeters to 70 millimeters. Those are considered your standard lenses. And then the next step up from that, from 70 millimeters to 135 millimeters, those are considered your standard telephoto lenses. And then anything over 135 millimeters is your telephoto lenses. Alright guys, so I figured the best way to show you the differences between the 5 different categories of lenses is to grab my camera. I'm going to go find a spot to shoot, and then we can just swap different lenses out and we can see what it does to our pictures. So I'm going to do that and we'll come back. So we are in Adobe Lightroom now. And these are the photos that I took, and we'll just kind of go through. We'll start at the ultra wide and then we will go to the telephoto lens. And I think this will give you a really good idea of how these different focal lengths really affect your images. And then one thing to keep in mind is that I was in the exact same spot, so I didn't move at all. I didn't get any closer or go any further. I stood in the exact same spot and I shot off all these different pictures with these different focal lengths. So let's just start with the ultra wide lens. And with this one, you can see that you really get a lot of your landscape and your scene into the picture. And I would say that this mountain is probably about 10 miles away from where I was standing. So you can see just how this lens just lets you get a lot of the landscape, and it really gives you a wide field of view. Now, if we go to step down to the next most wide angle, so this was shot at 24 millimeters. So even from the 14 millimeter to the 24 millimeter, you can instantly start to see how you start to get a little bit more compression. You're starting to see a little bit more detail in this road and kind of these houses that are in the foreground. And then this mountain's kind of starting to look a little bit more prominent in the picture. And that's just kind of because as you get deeper and deeper into your focal lengths, just the way the optics work, it actually just compresses your images. So whatever is in your background gets closer to whatever is in your foreground, and you're kind of going to see this as we keep going through these pictures. So from the 24 millimeter lens, we went to the 35 millimeter, and you can see even there again, if we just toggle between the two, you start to get a little bit more of the same compression. So my foreground is starting to disappear, especially compared to this 14 millimeter lens. And then this mountain is becoming more and more prominent, and you're starting to see more and more detail. Now next, we stepped it up to 50 millimeters, and you're seeing that exact same effect. From 35 to 50, you see that mountain's taking up more of the frame. Now I barely have any of this foreground snow, and there's that road still. I'm getting more detail. I'm starting to be able to see the cars, and then this mountain's taking up more of the frame. Now the next one I stepped up was to 70 millimeters, and from 70 millimeters, that exact same effect. You see this foreground starting to disappear. So the foreground on the 70 millimeter really starts at about these little snow bumps right there. You see, there they are right there. And then this mountain you see now is taking about a third of this frame up, and that road is getting bigger. Now if we just go back and we compare the 70 millimeter to the 14 millimeter, you can already see how much of a difference that makes. And that's really something you're going to want to start to think of, is how you want to represent your scene and how you want to make your pictures look. And that's something that you're going to want to think about, is how do you want to represent your scene? Do you want kind of this wide angle see all thing, or do you want to get a little bit more compressed and focus a little bit more on the details of the scene? Now from here we step it up to 105 millimeters, and I did this by just simply putting my camera into crop sensor. So I shoot on a Sony a7R II, and that has a 1.5 time crop sensor mode. So I put it into that with my 70 millimeter lens, and then this is what we got. So we went from this at 70 millimeters to this at 105 millimeters. So you can see that where the foreground is on this is about these houses that are on the edge right here. So it's almost like we just cropped into this little area right here by going from 70 to 105 millimeters. Now from 105 we went to 135. I put on my 135 lens, and then even there you can see where the foreground was here. The foreground on this one starts right about in this little white patch, and now you can start to see that this mountain is really taking up a majority of this frame, and then you just have a little bit of the clouds. Now from here, I did the same thing that I did with my 70mm lens. I put this into crop sensor mode, so my 135 ended up turning into a 202. And then here, the mountain is pretty much taking up the entire frame. I only managed to get a little bit of the houses that are on the foothill of it. So if we take a look at from this most telephoto focal length all the way to the ultra wide, you can see how dramatic of a difference this is going to be. So we went from this ultra wide angle lens to this telephoto lens, and you can just see those are two completely different pictures. So playing around with these focal lengths I think is going to really help you develop your eye and really help you just learn to take different pictures of the same scene but just with different points of view. And there are some drawbacks to some of these lenses. Obviously, the more telephoto you get, the less of the scene you can get, so that can be a drawback depending on where you are and what the scene looks like. With these ultra wides, you tend to lose a lot of the scale of the place, and then also depending on what ultra wide you have will depend on the type of distortion that you get. So you can see up here I'm getting some vignetting, and that's typical of this lens specifically. Some are worse, some are better. And then if I had some straight lines in this, you would see that this lens actually distorts those straight lines and almost gives it a slight fisheye effect, although not fully fisheye. Alright guys, so that's pretty much focal length. I hope this video helps you understand a little bit of what the different types of lenses and the different categories of focal length can do to your pictures. Hit that like button if you found this video helpful, subscribe, I got a lot more content coming, and of course, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.